What is up, everyone? My name is Adam with Next Home Synergy in the Lavin Real Estate Group, and I'm here today to answer a couple questions and bring some awareness to something that a lot of buyers and sellers aren't aware of in the process of buying a home that's completely necessary, and you actually usually can't purchase and live in a home without doing it in the state of Pennsylvania. And that's something called a use and occupancy inspection. Now, it has different names as you go from different cities and different townships, but what it is it is a certificate that is provided to the purchaser of a new home upon the end of the transaction from an inspection that comes from either the city or the township or bureau or whatever area you might be purchasing a home in. And it is needed so that you can use and occupy the home that you're purchasing. So that's what it is. Why it exists is to make sure, for the most part, that the home is safe for you at the bare minimum, and that also parts of the home that aren't necessarily parts of you living in the home that might have been covered by the home inspection already, such as sidewalks and other outdoor exterior items, are safe for the public as well in many scenarios. So, who is responsible for this and how this whole thing happens? So 99% of the time, the seller of the home or them combined with their real estate agent is responsible for applying for this UNO inspection. Generally, it costs about $100 plus or minus a few dollars depending on what area you're in, but in Delaware County and Chester County that we live in, it's pretty much the ballpark range. So that's the first process. Now, after that, the regulations that are involved in this and how it proceeds varies greatly from township to township and city to city. In some cases, the seller is responsible for not only getting the inspection, but also completing any repairs to any issues that might be found. There are other cities and bureaus and townships that it's kind of like negotiable between the buyer and seller as to who's going to be responsible for it and how long they have to complete the repairs. Sometimes it's a month after the purchase of your home. Sometimes it can be up to a year. And then there are other areas in Delaware and Chester County where it's actually completely the buyer's responsibility. So that's super important to know because it's unforeseen costs for both the seller and the buyer that a lot of times they just weren't planning on. Now, what comes up in these inspections? Well, again, it varies greatly. There are townships out there that'll come by and they'll really just do an inspection on like your sidewalks. There are others that actually go in the home. They check for things such as your electrical panel being certified, smoke detectors being installed properly, indoor plumbing working properly, so on and so forth. And then there's a whole myriad of other things that can come into play there. However, there are a few top things that I like to point out that are probably the biggest unexpected things that people don't really plan on or think about as they go to either purchase a home or sell a home. And so it's really important to understand what's going to be required in the zip code that you're purchasing the home, who's going to be responsible for it, and make sure that you're working with an agent that knows how to go through these proceedings and also can kind of warn you up front and give you an idea of what may be involved in this and what the costs might be associated with it. Now, the big things that generally hit people out of surprise and they don't realize how much it's going to cost to repair, number one are sidewalks. And the reason why is because most of the time you are going to have to hire somebody to do it. They're going to have to be a zoning permit or construction permit produced, and then the work professionally done, and then it come back and be re-inspected again. So it's not like you could just have Uncle Bob go out there and pour some concrete and move on with life. The next thing that throws people off a lot of times and is a big issue around here are the areas that require SOAR inspections, SOAR line scopes. And what that is they essentially send a camera down the sewer line, and if there are any cracks or potential issues, the seller and or buyer, depending on which township it is, can be responsible for the repair of these sewer lines. Now, sometimes everything's okay, sometimes everything's not okay, and depending on the severity of these issues, the repairs on this can actually turn into tens of thousands of dollars that either the buyer or seller wasn't planning on. The issue is that the UNO inspection is occurring generally after the purchase agreement has already been signed and the inspections are already over, because it takes a little bit longer for these townships and cities to get out there. And so we're legally locked into this, and it's kind of like, we got to get it done, right? Stucco and roof repairs are another big one that can get thrown out there. Now, often you can see this from bird's eye perspective, because that's really all that the inspectors are allowed to do, is do a visual check. They can't go in depth on the stucco and do a moisture check or anything like that. However, stucco repair can get rather costly to have a professional come out and do it. And again, some of these areas do require zoning and or construction permits. That can take a little bit to procure and sometimes require some red tape and paperwork to be done, as well as just the process changing from area to area can get a little bit confusing. Your electric system being certified. So indoors, sometimes they will require the electrical box to actually be certified by a certified electrician. So right there, that is slightly costly. And right now, over the last 2 or 3 years, vendors have been pretty backed up on being able to get out to homes in a timely manner to make any possible repairs. So it's just like another great thing to know whether or not that's going to be required. And if there's any visual things that we can kind of take care of up front before the actual inspection occurs. Now, usually it's some pretty easy things like double tap breakers being needed to, switched out and installed properly that happen along the way. However, at times, once you get a certified electrician in there, they might find a bigger issue and it can become rather costly. So it's something that you want to, be aware of and think about up front. And then the last thing that people don't realize sometimes are that zoning issues that weren't dealt with originally can pop up at times. Some of these townships and cities, they have different construction and zoning permits that are required as you build and add on to your house. So things like fencing, decks being installed, and extra items such as something like a barn or a shed being installed. There are zoning permits that often need to be issued for these items, as well as certain requirements as to how they're built, how high or wide they can be, what color they are, how close they can be to your property lines or other property lines. So what happens along the way a lot of times is, you'll go out when you own the house and do a weekend warrior project and maybe replace the fence or something like that, and you didn't really think too much about it, or you decide to do an at-home project and add a deck on, and you know how to do it, but you didn't go through the proper steps of getting it zoned and or permitted properly. That can come up at the end, and they will actually hold back the UNO being delivered to you until you get those things done properly. And there have been instances where we've actually had to, tear down things and then have them rebuilt because they weren't done properly to begin with, but they were already written into the agreement of sale, and so they needed to be there. So again, just another thing to kind of look out for and know what is required, what's not required, and what might pop up. So not to scare anybody, but it is definitely something to think about and to make sure that the agent that you plan on working with is aware of how those work in each community, that if you're selling your house, what you might be responsible for. And as you're buying a house and you're moving from zip code to zip code, there are other costs that can be associated with this purchase and things that you might be responsible for that you didn't know about. Now, If you have a question about a specific area that you're either moving into, or if you're thinking about selling in your house and you're like, I don't know what might actually need to be done, I'd love to get a chance to talk to you. I can go over everything with you, give you some estimates, get you in contact with the right people and right vendors to take care of these problems up front, so we don't have an issue when we get to closing and just trying to move on to your next home. So please give me a call. My number is 610-442-9371. You can text me or you can email me below as well. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a great day.